So after The Force Awakens released, Disney announced Star Wars spin-off films, the first of which being the movie this video is going to focus on, Rogue One. Rogue One was going to tell its own story beginning, middle and end. Often labelled as the best of the Disney movies, Rogue One is one of the few bright spots of the Disney movies, I guess. If you want to know what I think about this movie, stick around because I'll be critiquing it right now. Let's get to story. Yawn. This movie is fucking boring. This movie doesn't have an interesting premise to begin with. The reasons why the prequel trilogy was interesting was because there was actual intrigue of the Clone Wars, the rise of the Empire, the fall of Anakin Skywalker, among other things. This prequel, on the other hand, is how the Death Star plans were stolen. Something I never wondered about. I just thought, okay, the rebels won their first victory. I didn't think any more about it. So right off the bat, the conflict isn't all that interesting. The film begins 5 years after the rise of the Empire. We don't get an opening crawl for some reason, which automatically knocks off a point or two for this huge mistake. Title crawls are Star Wars tradition. Every Star Wars movie has it in some way. This film breaks tradition a lot, by the way, for no good reason. We essentially are introduced to the young Jyn Erso as an Imperial shuttle shows up to take her father away. This is where the title crawl would have helped, since now the film has to world build on its own. Essentially what happened is that the Empire tracked Jyn's dad Galen to the system where he and his family are living. So they decided to retrieve him and make him an asset to the Empire's Death Star project. Guess the Death Star needed another guy working on it, I guess. Galen tells Jyn to hide with her mother Lyra, but I guess for some reason, Lyra decides to risk her life to save her husband, leaving Jyn to fend for herself. We meet our main bad guy at this point, Krennic. And yes, Plinkett, there is a main bad guy. Just like how you questioned who the main character of The Phantom Menace was. And then Lyra predictably dies, causing Jyn to run off and hide in a hatch. Krennic's death troopers fail to find her, but you know who does? Morgan Freeman. Except this time around he has a gruff voice. I'm calling him Morgan Freeman because aside from Jyn Erso and her dad, I failed to remember any of the characters' names, so I just gave them nicknames. I can remember all the major characters' names nowadays because I've looked up a lot of lore videos based on this movie for external information. Cassian was the captain guy, Bodhi was the Pakistan guy, Sharut was the sensei guy, Krennic was the director guy, and Baze Malbus was the Jamaican drum player. Keep in mind this was before I realized he was Chinese and not black. Before you call me a racist, in my defense, the way the movie is shot and lighted and the actor's appearance himself kinda makes his ethnicity ambiguous from the first time watching. Anyways, now that we've spoken about that, let's move on. So the movie cuts to like 14 years later. Jyn is in an Imperial prison camp to do labor because she broke the law. Right off the bat, this film earns points for taking a morally grey approach to the Galactic Civil War. This time, the Empire are not the blatant bad guys, and the rebels aren't the blatant good guys. Good to see you took notes from Revenge of the Sith. So right off the bat, the film actually conveys themes. Well, second only to Revenge of the Sith. This is the definite highlight of the movie. The film may be boring, but it's not god-awful boring at least. Essentially, we see how good the rebels really are is when Cassian kills his informant, who informs him on the Death Star. It's also where we meet Bodhi Rook, the Imperial pilot with information about the Death Star plans on Jeddah, where we meet Morgan Freeman's partisans.
The three of us this morning, I'm the only one this evening, but I must go on. The frontiers are my prison. Oh, the wind is blowing through the graves. The wind is blowing. Freedom soon will come. Then will come from the shadows.
So back to Jyn. She gets rescued by the rebels but decides to immediately swing a shovel at them. Jesus! Of course, because of this, she is led in cuffs to the Yavin 4 base, where in exchange for her freedom, she must locate her dad since the rebels identified her as the scientist's daughter. So point is, they go to Jeddah City on the planet Jeddah to find Morgan Freeman or whatever. It's also here where we meet Sharut and Baze Malbus, whose introduction is okay. Morgan Freeman's partisans commit a terrorist attack on the people in Jeddah City, and then we've got the blind sensei doing kung fu and shit. And then the partisans show up to capture Jin, Cassian, Sensei, and Baze. The thing that saves all of them is Jin telling everyone her identity as Galen's daughter. So basically what happens is that Jin and crew go to the partisan hideout. It's here where we get our New Hope retcon. Now, most of the time retcons are bad, but this is actually one of the few times it's actually good, or at least done well. Morgan Freeman shows Jin the message from her father directed at her, where he reveals everything about the Death Star, and also reveals that he purposely designed a flaw so small that there's a chance it could be destroyed. The exhaust port that Luke used to destroy the Death Star in the original movie. But then, what the fuck is that thing? Is that supposed to be Tarkin? Alright, so Tarkin and Krennic decide to test the Death Star on Jeddah City, and so the now formed Rogue One crew decide to book it. But Morgan Freeman's inability to run makes him decide to stay behind to die. So after all that, Rebel intelligence decides to order Cassian to assassinate Galen Erso. In one of the most memorable scenes in this movie, Krennic does a lineup of everyone accused of betraying the Empire. When no one steps forward, he just decides to call it a group effort, but Galen steps forward to save his co-workers, but Krennic kills him anyway. This is perhaps the most heartbreaking moment in the movie. Now, I'm gonna go on a little tangent. Just because someone doesn't speak, doesn't mean we can't feel their pain when something bad happens to them. People make this criticism against Revenge of the Sith and Order 66. Yeah, they don't speak, except for Kiandi Mundi, but we feel it because we know their tragedy. We know plenty about these background characters. They're Jedi gunned down by the squadrons they commanded. We have a connection to the faction. In the same sense, we know enough about the Death Star engineers to care about them despite their brief screen time. They work for the Empire and are falsely accused of treason, and even when Galen confirms himself as the traitor, Krennic kills them anyway. We can also infer that these Death Star engineers were not bad people either. Otherwise, why would Galen stop in to save them? He cares about his co-workers, and as we are shown, Galen is a good person. So anyways, what essentially happens is that the rebels bomb the target, and after Jin and Galen reunite in Galen's final moments, it convinces Jin to get the Death Star plans. So after a meeting with the rebels about the Death Star, Jin and some organized rebels decide to go to Scarif where the Death Star plans are hidden. One by one the rebels are killed, but Jin and Cassian manage to send the Death Star plans before the Death Star comes and destroys the planet's surface. All 6 of the Rogue One crew perish on Scarif. Afterwards, the rebels receive the Death Star plans to which it narrowly escapes Darth Vader. And all that leads directly into New Hope. From Disney standards, this was a fucking masterpiece. But by normal standards, this was decent. It's boring, but it's not that kind of boring. It does quite a lot of things right. First off, the themes are the heart of the movie. While the immediate plot may be mediocre, the messages are handled quite well. Despite the lackluster premise, the film itself managed to be a serviceable tale about the heroic sacrifice the rebels were willing to go through to receive a small chance at defeating the Empire.
No sacrifice. No victory.
Continuing the theme that morality is not so black and white, and the Empire and Rebels can be very similar in many different circumstances. I always did doubt that the Empire were just blatant bad guys. Having every character die was not as emotionally investing as I'd like, but it does at least carry a punch. Now for the bad. The film obviously had behind the scenes problems, which holds it back from its true potential. The film is sluggish at times, which is why it's boring. The film underutilizes certain characters like Morgan Freeman. He doesn't really do much in the film. It's not like he isn't essential, but they could have explored him a lot more. This is the type of film you'd either really like or dislike. I'm going to give 6 points to this segment. Bland. Bland all over. The biggest gripe I have with this movie is that the colours looked washed out. Like the film is undersaturated. There isn't enough color. I want to make this clear that this is different from The Force Awakens, because The Force Awakens was colored just fine, but the problem was the rehashing of colors we've already seen. When it comes to shots, I guess they're okay, but that's the thing, it's just passable. There's nothing special about it. Shots can assist the story, but they're not as good as it could be. The lighting though, good God, sucks. This film isn't lighted like a Star Wars movie. It seems like the lighting for something like a gothic dystopia or something like that. I don't know how to describe it. I guess the best shots include, maybe all the Darth Vader shit, especially the end. That's the thing, most of the film is either forgettable or unremarkable. I barely remember this shit. So since I don't have a lot to say about cinematography, let's move on to editing. The film, as mentioned before, is sluggish. It's not impossible to tell a slow-paced story, but I dislike how Rogue One paces its story. It's boring. Some stuff is dragged out for way too long. There's some scenes that aren't really that important. Stuff like this includes Bodhi Rook after he's been interrogated. Honestly, I barely noticed Bodhi. He's probably the least charismatic, least interesting, least important group of Rogue One. Maybe they should have given him more to do. Same thing goes with Morgan Freeman. What was the point of his character? He won't mean anything to you unless you watch the Clone Wars animated show. Those are the two biggest examples, but the rest of the cast is no different. The way the film is edited, it seems like every character needs more scenes. I'm going to give 5 points to this segment. Good effects, not great, but they do their job. Aside from the horrible CGI Tarkin and Leia, very disrespectful. I can only imagine Disney pissing on their graves. Now let's talk about visual design. Same problem with the last movie. Nothing looks like Star Wars. In fact, the things that are supposed to be original trilogy aliens look, well, here, have a look. Jesus, what the fuck is that? Apparently this is Bib Fortuna's cousin, but seriously, how the hell was I supposed to tell they were even the same species? Seriously, what the fuck are these things? This guy in particular looks like the dog from those Japanese Calbee commercials. If you've never heard of Calbee, here, have a look. See what you think.
コンソメパンチポンチじゃないよコンソメパンチうまさが効いてるコンソメパンチコンソメパンチコンソメパンチパンチで元気コンソメパンチ
So that's the commercial. Were you terrified? Because the two are a perfect resemblance, minus maybe the shape of the head. So these designs are fucking weird. Even for stuff closely connected to the original trilogy, they are strange too. Like a shore trooper? What the fuck is that? Why would you need a trooper on the shore? This doesn't make any sense. Death Troopers are just shadow troopers with a different name. In fact, it's far from original. They took the name from a fucking book and thought no one would notice. Do they think we're idiots? As for sets, they're alright, I guess. Either they're meant to resemble New Hope locations, or they're new locations, and let me say the latter of them suck. The opening set is just a big fucking field. Perfect for playing football. Wabani isn't much of a set, and Jeddah City is fucking boring as a location. I have no interest in it. You get the point. We're going to give 5 points to this segment. Felicity Jones plays Jyn Erso. She's fucking boring, she has no cool lines, uninteresting delivery, and suffers from lackluster direction. She wasted her time being in this movie. Diego Luna plays Cassian Andor. The only thing I remember about this guy is his fucking accent. Like Felicity, he suffers from all the previously mentioned problems. Ben Mendelsohn plays Director Krennic. Now this guy's perhaps the best actor in the movie. In interviews, he seems like he really gave a shit about Star Wars and was proud to be cast in this movie. As such, Mendelsohn is very expressive and comes across as a threat due to his delivery. Well done. Riz Ahmed plays Bodhi Rook. Who the fuck is this guy again? Donnie Yen plays Sharut Imwe. You know what? Fuck it, I'll probably butcher it. This guy's a walking stereotype of Chinese martial artists. And Donnie Yen plays into the stereotype very well, but it's not exactly entertaining. It's kind of goofy. I have no idea where this casting choice came from. Jiang Wen plays Baze Malbus. Baze Malbus always felt like the tough guy of the group. He doesn't do much aside from his first proper introduction and his final scene. I did feel a little bit of emotion with him chanting Chirrut's lines about the Force. Well done there. Also, on the casting director's side, I like how they got a guy with an ethnically ambiguous look. Morgan Freeman plays himself. I had no idea Morgan Freeman could put on such a gruff voice, but I guess that just shows his wide acting range, and can put on any persona. But even then, his performance is lame. They make him say weird things, and he's just got no personality. Plus, it is kind of weird that instead of being a wise man, he's a terrorist. I'm going to give 3 points to the acting. This is the first mainstream Star Wars movie to not be composed by John Williams. Instead, Michael Giacchino composes this movie. He does his best to replicate the Star Wars saga without being an outright copy of John Williams' work. He does try his best to replicate the Star Wars saga without being an outright copy of John Williams. Some of the music, you can easily tell it wasn't composed by John Williams. Some of the soundtrack sucks, and they play sometimes where they really shouldn't. What I will give the soundtrack is that towards the end of the movie, they're used to its full advantage. Music is really important depending on the film, and this film certainly delivers. My favourite track in the movie would have to be the sequence involving the Darth Vader hallway scene. The film manages to be suspenseful and everything hits the right note. Still, I thought Michael Giacchino was a questionable choice for a Star Wars movie. Why they couldn't just get John Williams again is baffling. Giacchino was known for composing a bunch of Pixar movies, including Up. His music in the Pixar movies were great, but in Rogue One they kind of feel like Giacchino was trying to replicate Williams, which is even more proof they should have just gotten the man himself. As for sound effects, it's great stuff. This film has more of an excuse to not innovate as much because it's a spin-off set right before the original trilogy era. They can stick to what is familiar. However, due to its alienating visual design, the sound effects sound kind of out of place. They don't feel like they belong. New sound effects we get are not actually half bad, although I would say the original and prequel trilogies did it better. Audio clarity is used to its full advantage and everything fits. I'm going to give 6 points to the music/sound. In conclusion, Rogue One is a bright spot in the utter shit show that is Disney Star Wars. However, what makes it the best compared to the other films is that it made an honest attempt to expand the Star Wars universe instead of stealing and plagiarizing shit in a recycling shit show. But can that really be called a compliment? That's what The Force Awakens should have tried to achieve day one into production. Now then, now that I've achieved all the necessary build-up, it's time for the black sheep next time. Rogue One has earned a total of 25 points out of 50, equaling a 5 out of 10 score. Sorry Rogue One fans, but this movie was just a big blab for me. I'm JJ Plagiarisms, and until next time, what are stories from mystery boxes?
No one gave us shelter, kept us hidden in the garret. Then the soldiers came. She died without a whisper. There were 3 of us.